Happy to be with you all again this evening. It's better to be inside than outside right now, so that's a good thing. Welcome to our, I think, 4th edition of the Long Range Facility Planning Committee. You can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Yes. Testing, all right. So thank you for being here this evening. We do have a very full agenda, and we have our guests from Cooperative Strategies here, and they'll be leading us through the majority of the meeting this evening, and we're really going to start digging more deeply into those high school options. We're going to take us through some pieces of the PASA data. I know we just kind of talked in a broad sense. We're going to dig a little more deeply there. We're going to begin discussions around ideal sizes for particularly secondary level, middle school and high school campuses, and then we'll dig into those high school options. If you remember, we kind of brainstormed some questions around those options, and Cooperative Strategies is here this evening to provide us a little bit of data and feedback based on our questions. But as I always like to do, I like us to kind of reflect on where we were and where we're going, because I think it's important, regardless of what our decision is around high school options and size, it's important we focus on what our vision is for that experience, for the middle school experience, for the high school experience. And so we're going to kind of review back some of the work that we've done. Again, when we look at committee charge, we are looking at that future focus on what capacities do we need at each level. We're also looking at additional spaces as we grow. What other spaces do we need related to transportation, ancillary facilities, and we also have to kind of look and project out with our existing 7 campuses, what are those potential needs for maintenance and upkeep to make sure that regardless of what campus our kiddos are on, a new campus or a seasoned campus, that they still are quality facilities. Again, as far as expected results, we're looking to try to bring some recommendations to the school board this spring on ideas on number of campuses we're looking at over the next 5 to 8 years. Also potential when we think we may need to start looking at bonds to fund those campuses. And again, we're looking at best practices, finding out what's working out there, and trying to identify what is best for our community, for our students, and based on our geographic size, how those would play into our future as we build out our community. And again, this is an advisory committee. We are not making final decisions, but we are making strong recommendations for the consideration of the board as they look at that large long-term plan. Our norms, again, these are pretty basic, being transparent, being respectful to each other. There's going to be, it's not if, but there will be differing opinions in the room, and so we want to be respectful for all of those opinions and honor those as we process through this. Collective commitments, again, we want to keep students at the center. We want to focus on making what that decision looks like for the best interest of our kiddos and that experience we want to provide to our students. And we want to maintain open dialogue again and consider all possibilities before we make a decision. I put this up. This was one of those first questions I asked, what would success look like? And you can see developing that comprehensive plan. We feel really good if we're able to present something that the committee can get behind related to what that plan looks like for the long term. We also talked about really wanting to come to some consensus and all being able to support what we come up with. We also believe very strongly in fiscal responsibility and that student focus as we talked about before. The challenge is on your right. Again, growth is hard. We're going to see projections, and that's the best data we have at any given time. And as we go through that planning process, if we see anything that shifts away from that projected, those projections, then we'll adjust our plans accordingly. But we can only operate on what we believe to be the best possible data. And working with PASA over time, they've been very close. Some years they'll be down a little bit, the next year they'll be up, but if you look at it over the long haul, they come very, very close to those projections. And we typically try to project at that middle growth plan, not projecting too far or too aggressively, and also not too conservatively. You remember another activity this group went through is focusing on what is that ideal high school experience. As we're going to look at models tonight, we want to keep those factors in mind, and later on in the evening I'm going to pass hard copies out, so as we're going through those models you can look at those critical elements that were identified to say which of these models best fit our vision for what we're looking for our students. When I asked you what was important when we're discovering those or exploring those models, we came up with these particular things, and you'll see things everything from budget, making sure we're accounting for student voice, also the importance of surveying. This is a great representation of the community, but we also had a strong feeling like when we get to a point, we'd like to go out to the community and get greater feedback and provide opportunities for our community to have a voice and feedback on the plans as we develop those. This is a little bit hard to see, but again, from student voice perspective, I went out and met with a student focus group of 25 and walked them through some of that same Imagineering experience, and theirs was slightly different because the question I asked was what you like about your current high school since they're living it. So that's that first column, and on the right then is taking that experience, what are some additional things you'd like to see to enhance that experience. And so again, you'll get a hard copy of this as we start to dig through those high school options. Lastly, remember we brainstormed of those 12, 14 options, which ones we felt like would be the best fit, and we kind of bubbled up 4 or 5 options. And then I asked you, what questions do you have about those options? And so we collected that information and provided to Corporate Strategies. As they present on those options, you'll note that they're trying to answer a lot of the questions that we had. And at the very end of the presentation and the meeting tonight, we'll be asking again what questions have not been answered for you and what do we need to explore further. So we're excited about tonight, and we've done a lot of work to lead up to tonight, which will, again, we'll start shifting into more real deeper dive into a lot of the conversations we started to have. And so I'm going to introduce Scott Leopold, and he is with Cooperative Strategies. We're fortunate. Cooperative Strategies has been in the game for over 20 years, or no, 25 years, and they've actually worked with over 2,000 districts, many like ourselves, that growing at a rapid rate, also recognizing that each district has its own unique challenges and own unique vision of what they want to accomplish. So without further ado, Scott Leopold, come on up and go walk us through the rest of the meeting.
Great, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Again, I'm Scott Leopold, Cooperative Strategies, and I wanted to begin the evening with just some initial reactions. So I want to kind of come straight out at it. Kind of our first question here, what is the ideal enrollment for middle schools in Dripping Springs? Currently, we have capacities that are 850 and 1200. So if we're going to move forward, what should our model be? Should it be that 850, or should it be that those larger facilities, those 1200s? Keeping in mind that if we're going to have larger facilities, we'll need fewer of them, and they'll be a little bit more efficient to operate. So this one's pretty easy. I'm just going to ask for a show of hands. So who's not sure? Okay. 1, 2. Keep up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and a half, 16. Okay. How about 850? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, how about 1200? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so most people are not sure. Who thinks that we should ask the community what they think? Okay, you can raise your hand if you've already voted. Okay, so that's the kind of first exercise. The next one is going to take considerably longer. So this is for high schools. And so I want to get your initial reaction of this, and then I'm going to show you the ramifications of that reaction as far as what it means relative to the projected enrollment and how many schools it means. So I'm going to ask Chase and Corey to kind of quickly hand out green stickies and blue stickies out here. And what I'd like you to do is, for the green stickies, indicate what your ideal number is. And on the yellow stickies, if you want to indicate what you think is too large. And what we're going to do is we're going to plot them up over here. We're going to get some instant gratification, and we're going to find out where everybody is immediately. And let's just take about 5 minutes to do this. And if you want to caucus at your tables as we're going through this, and bounce some ideas off some other people and see what everybody thinks, that's fine with me too. But we will have a chance to kind of go back and change your mind after you see the data. Okay.
These are better.
Sorry? Okay, so looking at this, I'm seeing that smaller is better, according to this group. So, looks like the majority of you thought 2,500 was the number. We had a few that thought the 2,500 was too large. The reason that we started with the 2,500 is because that is the capacity of this facility once the addition is complete. We've got a couple of 3,000, then it starts to fall off, and then you can see kind of where all the yellow stickies kind of come in, that everybody kind of feels that those are too large. And so that kind of, I look at this, if I'm going to pick a range, I would say that between 2,500 and 3,000 is ideal, and then once we get to 35 and 4,000, that starts to become a little bit too large. Okay, so now, I'm going to move into the PASA data a little bit. PASA is a company out of College Station, population and survey analyst. They are the district's demographer. As Todd has said, they've done some very good work. These are the projections for the next 8 years that show us what our utilization is. When I talk about utilization, that's enrollment divided by capacity. And so the numbers that we're showing here, that we highlighted in yellow, this indicates once we hit 120% of capacity. So that indicates basically when we're taxing the cores of the building. So the gymnasiums, the cafeterias, the hallways. If we look at the elementary schools, you can see down here, this is the overall utilization. And this is once we have elementary school 5 online. We don't hit above 100% in the next 8 years. So we're in relatively good shape with the elementary school capacities. Looking at middle schools, we have a couple different scenarios here. This kind of shows that capacity number of the middle schools being at 800 to 850. This shows our 1,200 capacity, basically at both facilities. And so we hit 105% in 2024-25, but we don't go above 120 overall until we get to 2027-28, but we do hit it at one of the buildings in 25-26. So that's the elementary and middle schools. Moving on to high schools. So with the current capacity without the addition at 1,850, we're at 120% next year. With the addition coming online, it buys us basically 4 years before we get to 121% based on those projections. And so based on those projections, you can kind of see what that delta is. So we're to the point in 2028-29 where we're looking at potentially 4,304 students. So that's a delta of 1,804 students. Okay, so now moving on, here's basically what your selections mean. So I didn't get a whole lot of consensus around the middle schools, but if we have our middle school size at 850, we're looking at about 7 middle schools build out. And this build out number is again from PASA, and this is based on basically everything that they know right now that is developable building out and adding students. And our build out number is just shy of 6,000 at the middle school level and just shy of 7,500 at the high school level. So looking at this, we're at seven middle schools at 850, and we're at about 5 middle schools at 1,200. So moving on to high schools, based on our feedback over here, we're somewhere between 2 and 3 high schools at build out. And I'm not contending that these are comprehensive schools. This is just high school space. That's how much high school space we'll need. You know, if those facilities are sized at 2,500, we're again looking at that 3 high school range. And if we're sized at 3,000, 3,500, we're closer to 2 high schools, maybe 2 high schools, and maybe a smaller facility to draw students off. We'll sort of show some examples of that. So seeing this, Did anybody really change their mind, or was this a meaningless exercise and you all know what you wanted anyway? Okay, I don't see any hands that anybody changed their minds, and this isn't surprising. So I'm going to move on. What I've done is I've kind of taken some guidance from what you shared with the group in the previous meeting, and I've pulled together some examples, and I've just begun to develop some strengths and challenges for these. And Chase and Corey, if you want to start handing out some flip charts, what I'd like you to do is I've got 5 different examples to go through, and I want you to try to think of additional strengths and challenges to these as we go forward. And so we're going to have, again, 1 flip chart per table, and we'll end up doing a gallery walk or a table walk at the end. And we'll use this as we move forward to present options to the community. So our first option that we've kind of illustrated here is a 9th grade center. And so the example, this is a facility that I've driven through, I feel like dozens of times on my way from Fort Bend to Houston Hobby Airport. This is Dobby 9th grade center in Pasadena. That's our Dobie. Sorry. I've got a little bit of the Texas down. I know it's Bowie, not Bowie. So this is a 9th grade center. And so this is the main high school campus down here. This is the Beltway. And this is the 9th grade center and Hobby Airport's up here. The original high school opened in 2003. Due to overcrowding, the 9th grade center opened up in 2016. This just kind of shows you an aerial view of the 9th grade center. Just some things to note. You see all the large field spaces around the high school, and the 9th grade center basically has a track, and that's about it. So it doesn't have the same site requirements as a full comprehensive high school. It's not going to be as large. It's going to be a little bit less expensive to build. The benefits of this, it works towards keeping kind of that small town feel that you all really shared that was important. Less costly to build and operate than a second comprehensive high school, requires less land, facilitates a gentler transition into high school. A lot of systems like that 9th grade center because some people feel that the students may not be quite old enough to face high school in their 9th grade, so it gives another opportunity for gentler transition. The challenges of this, it's limited by the capacity of the high school that it feeds into. So 2,500 is our capacity for the high school. We're looking at a 9th grade center that will hold between 800 and 900 students, so roughly a third of that senior high school. It does add another transition. It may limit access to advanced programming and extracurriculars. So there may be a challenge for freshmen to participate in varsity sports if they're at that level. It may decrease parent involvement. Typically, we see single grade schools. We don't see as much parent involvement because there's really only a 1-year commitment. So that's something that can also be a challenge at that. This will likely increase traffic congestion depending on where it's located. And based on our projections, we would get to 120% of capacity in 2027-28. Just some other considerations. Most systems that have these in place have them in very close proximity to the high school so that for transportation they can use the same route. And they might have bell times that are a couple minutes staggered off, but they don't have a separate route to pick students up and pick them from the schools. They pick up the freshmen and the senior, the junior, sophomore, junior, seniors, all the same bus route. I'll talk about this in a little bit. This is a building that could be repurposed for another once it's outgrown. So it could function as a 9th grade center now. It could focus on something else later if that's what the district desires. So what I'd like you to do is just take about 5 minutes at your table, talk about this, try to generate any strengths and challenges, and if you just want to write 9th grade center on your flip chart, and I would volunteer whoever is the neatest writer at your table to be the scribe, and then just write 9th grade, and then just do pluses for the benefits and minuses for the challenges. We don't need iambic pentameter, bullet points are just fine. Don't need paragraphs or anything like that. Just bullet point ideas. These are things that we'll consider as we share these in the community, and we'll ensure that we are kind of fair and balanced to make sure that the benefits and challenges are consistent across the options. And I'll kind of walk around. If you have any questions, raise your hand. I'll come and try to answer the best I can.
They could add on triangles.
Okay, folks, this is great conversations, but I'd like to move on. Feel free to come back and maybe add more to this as you're talking about some of the other concepts. The next one we have here is a little similar. This is a 9-10, 11-12 kind of a tandem facility. So this is basically a high school and a senior high school. The example that we have here is Plano ISD. So Jasper High School is a 9-10 facility that feeds into Plano West High School. Jasper opened in 1996, 240,000 square feet. Plano West Senior High opened in 1999. It's a renovation from an older high school. So this is Jasper up here. You can see, limited field space, and then we've got a lot of field space down here at the senior high school. And so, again, I would look at the density of the housing here, and I think that we're probably a couple miles away. There are some other examples of these schools that are actually on the same site. Zeeland High School in Michigan has two high schools that are across the parking lot from each other. So this is just an example of what that 9, 10, 11, 12 concept would look like. Looking at the benefits and challenges, again, it works towards keeping the small town feel, requires less land. We wouldn't necessarily need that full competition athletic facility with that lower level. Facilitates a gentler transition into high school again. It accommodates projected enrollment beyond 2028-29 because we're essentially looking at doubling the high school capacity with this. Nearly the same costs as a comprehensive high school. You're really looking at very similar square footage. You don't have as much of the ancillary athletic costs than they have the full high school. May limit access to advanced programming and extracurriculars. Will likely increase traffic congestion because you've got two different facilities kind of crossing paths there. One thing I would point out with this is that other districts that have looked into this, and this is something that you may want to add as a benefit, you wouldn't necessarily have a disparity between the two schools because of demographics, because theoretically this is pulling from everything if there's only two. So that's just another consideration, is that you have a transition in high school, you have complications with programming, those types of things, but you will have you'll have essentially the same size student body, so it shouldn't limit access to programs as much because you'll have enough critical mass to offer those programs in both schools. But that athletic piece, student leadership piece, that challenge is still there. Again, those systems have these in place, have these schools in close proximity to each other. Another consideration is this could be something that you can try out and then transition into something different, because again, the facility here is going to be pretty similar to a regular comprehensive high school, which is the programming change to shift to that. So this is something that could start out and change later if more comprehensive high schools. So let's take about 5 or 10 minutes and kind of go through this one and think about those benefits and challenges. If you've got room on the chart that you already have, just draw a horizontal line and then have the next concept. Okay, move on to the next one. So there were a lot of ideas about a STEM or a STEAM or a new tech center. I've kind of lumped all of these into a choice campus because essentially in any of those concepts, the building is relatively the same. It's from a square footage and a cost standpoint. And so I've got a couple different examples to share. Unfortunately, these aren't from Texas, so don't from the other town. Clark Hall. This is the Hannah Jefferson Schools outside of Columbus, Ohio. This is a one high school town that's relatively compact from a land standpoint, but they were coming up to that kind of threshold where they needed additional space at the high school level. And they built this mixed-use facility that had kind of retail space on the first floor that would be part of the vocational program. And there was a FedEx office in there at one point that the kids would help staff and work at. and they had some advanced kind of STEM classroom spaces upstairs. I'm going to be 100% upfront with you, this did not work for this district. They could not get enough kids to elect to leave kind of that traditional high school environment. And so right now it's being used for for tech classes. They actually have pre-K in there because it's built as a flexible facility. But that's just an example of an ancillary facility that relieve high school overcrowding and didn't necessarily work in this particular case. Another one we have is Emerald Campus in Dublin, Ohio. This was opened in 2018. They stole a building from Verizon. They bought an office building that was, I think, north of 200,000 square feet for $7 million. And so when we start talking about cost and square footage later, you'll start to see how good of a deal that is. But they ended up moving their administration space, and they have some STEM and some engineering courses in here. This is in close proximity to their high school. This one worked, and the reason this one worked is they have 3 high schools to feed. They're not trying to pull all the students from one high school. Another one here, this is a Manatee Technical College, and so this is going to be kind of that new tech route. So this opened in 2014 as a state-of-the-art career center. They also have all their district events in here. They have the atrium space, but this is full-blown career tech. They have welding, they have engineering. They're able to draw quite a few students in here, and they also have beyond 12th grade courses in there as well. And this has been very successful, but it also has 3 or 4 high schools that it draws from. And so some of the benefits of this, it can work towards keeping that small town feel. It may be less costly depending on the components that are required for the program. My guess would be this is going to be a little bit more expensive than an accurate center because some of those spaces might require some pretty advanced outfitting. Requires less land. Typically we could see something like this on 20 acres or something like that because you don't need all that athletic space. And it does not require that anybody leave their existing high school experience. But one of the challenges is that the impact of reducing overcrowding is dependent on the interest of students to elect to make that choice. And so it's one of those things where it's kind of a gamble. If we can make the program attractive enough for students to leave in enough mass to reduce the overcrowding, that's great. Likely would not necessarily reduce traffic congestion. Just a consideration here, most systems that have these have multiple high schools that they draw from. And so that's just kind of a high level consideration of these. I wouldn't get so caught up on what the program is that's in there. That will come later, but I would focus on just the concept of having a smaller choice school that would be intended to draw students organically from the traditional high school. So let's take a couple minutes to discuss this one. Again, if you need another piece of paper, you don't have it at your table, raise your hand. You do that horizontal line and start the next concept. I'm going to move on to the next one because most students are about time. Okay. Okay. Then we'll spend about 2 minutes on the benefits and challenges of this one. So this is continuing to expand the current campus, so we have an airport up here. This is Allen High School, 163 students, only 10, 12, and it's on 177 acres. I guess theoretically it keeps the one high school feel, but I don't know that it's a small town with that. Increased programmatic opportunities due to size. Depending on land acquisitions, maybe just as expensive as constructing additional regular-sized schools. Vastly increased traffic, reduced opportunities for leadership and extracurricular participation. Those systems that have these aren't 200 square miles. So let's go about 2 or 3 minutes on this one, and then we'll go to the last one. Last one we have here is additional comprehensive high school. Okay. So again, I struggled trying to find a system that was going from 1 school to 2 schools. I found a whole ton of districts that were going from 10 to 11, 4 to 5. This is a district we worked with that went from 1 to 2. This is northeast of Indianapolis. So this is Fisher's High School that actually opened in 2003 as a 9th grade campus. It was purpose-built to be added on to later. And so they converted it to a full second high school in 2008. One thing I will note is that these are, look at the density here of the homes. These are in pretty close proximity, but this district is not 200 square miles. So just some considerations for this example. I thought it was interesting because it started out as an 9th grade center, but it was an 9th grade center because of its proximity. Creates the most long-term capacity. Theoretically, if we're all on one site, we can create just as much capacity if we just kept building the building. It would reduce traffic congestions because we have, essentially attendance zones for high school at that point, for May. Allows more opportunity for student leadership and participation. So you'll have 2 varsity football teams, 2 leads in the plays, 2 student councils, etc. It could be one of the more costly options, and it may compromise that small town feel. And so those are kind of our benefits and challenges that I came up with. I'm sure that you guys can do many more. So let's start talking about this. I did a summary slide. So this may answer some of the questions that you may have had. Student capacity, again, 9th grade center, 800 to 900 based on that 2,500 that we have here. If we're looking at our choice campus, it's really going to be dependent on interest. Stay with one high school with additions, 7,300, that's that PASA build-out number. Additional comprehensive high schools, 2,500. So these aren't exactly apples to apples because we're kind of showing going all the way out to 7,300. Square footage range, additional 9th grade center, we're at 130,000 to 160. 9th grade center, 9, 10, 11, 12. Comprehensive high school, we're in that 420 to 450,000 square foot range. Choice campus, about the same as that 9th grade center, may vary a little bit based on program. If we stay with one high school with additions, we're looking at north of 1 million square feet eventually. Site requirements, we can get away on, 9th grade center maybe 20 acres, maybe a little larger. 9, 12, probably 60 acres. Choice campus, again, at 20 acres. Large mega high school, 150 plus. Additional comprehensive school, 80 plus acres. Traffic increase here, 9th grade center would probably have an increase. Probably a big increase with the 9-12, because you'd essentially run at 2 routes depending on sites. This is the 9, 10, 11, 12. Choice campus, probably about the same as 9th grade center. This would require a traffic study. We could be getting engineers on this one. And we could have a potential reduction with this. Somebody did bring up that the traffic is going to be relatively the same. It's just going to be displaced in somewhere else. So it may not be fair to say that it's a reduction in any scenario we do. If we're looking at the longevity of these, 9th grade center, 8 to 10 years until we hit our capacity limit again. That 9, 10, 11, 12 is going to be that 15 plus, depending on what the capacity is that we land on. Again, that choice concept is kind of that what if, dependent on interest. Staying with one high school, 15 plus, depending on the capacity. Comprehensive high school, again, when we went through our exercise earlier, kind of in that land between 2 and 3 high schools. Looking at the capital costs, this is just kind of that Yelp scale. This isn't going to give us exact numbers, but just kind of relative ballpark swags here. Is a 9th grade center going to be half as expensive as a new comprehensive high school? Maybe it'll be close. I don't believe it's going to be exactly half, but I think we'll be close to that. You're not going to have all those additional field spaces that you may need. The 9, 10, 11, 12 is probably going to be about the same as a comprehensive high school, maybe a little bit less. Choice campus, probably a little bit more than a 9th grade center, but less than a comprehensive high school because it's smaller. This could be all over the place. This could be less expensive than one additional comprehensive high school, but likely not less expensive than 2. I question just the size of the pipes coming into the site and if they're adequate to support that much infrastructure that would be required for that. And then again, our additional comprehensive high school. Whether or not this requires land acquisition, 9th grade center, yes, hopefully in close proximity to the high school. Same with the 9, 10, 11, 12. Choice campus, maybe not. Staying with one high school, we would have to acquire land that's adjacent to this site in order to make that work. And an additional comprehensive high school, we would not need to acquire additional land. And so that's kind of the summary of this. Since you guys were fast workers and we had got through this half an hour faster than I thought we were going to get through. I'd love to hear.
Sure. Oh, I was just going to say that there's a lot of information up there. Do y'all have any questions or clarification on that slide itself? And again, knowing that it's still kind of at a broad level, but do those kind of numbers or placeholders?
I have a question on the large high school where it says land acquisition being adjacent to existing high school. Is that realistic as an option?
Every day it gets tougher and tougher, right, to acquire land, especially right here. And again, you really would have to look at, there are some properties that are on the market right now, but nothing that we have in pocket that we own currently. And again, there's a huge question. When you talk 7,300 student high school, and what we saw what was Allen, 170, 180 acres.
177.
Almost 180 acres. I think we would be pretty hard pressed to find that within even what's available now. And keeping in mind, we have Roger Hanks Parkway, that there is plans for an extension to go all the way through that would actually, we currently do own some property, but it's going to be split by Roger Hanks Parkway, so it kind of eliminates some of our flexibility on those acreage numbers that you see up there.
So how much do we actually have after that?
What?
How much do we have after that?
After the cut through on Hanks, probably in the neighborhood of 15 acres.
Yeah, I thought that said like 14 or 17 acres or something like that.
Yeah, so it's not ideal as far as maximizing our usage for it. Yes, sir.
I see the capacity for longevity, is that based on our actual growth, or is that just taken on average?
That's based on the PASA projections. We basically have a 10-year projection number, and then we put build-out number. How long it takes to get to that build-out number is kind of dependent on growth, but I'm pretty confident in kind of those ranges.
Well, and again, I think with capacity it also depends on when you build that, right? If you build it right at 2,500, you might get that 8. And I would lean more on the 8 versus the 10. But again, if we're waiting until we're 3,000 plus to build it, then that number shrinks, right? So it becomes a shorter capacity issue that we're able to fill.
What's the status, remind me of the status on the land there at Garden Hill Road?
Okay, yeah, so we have a total of 155 acres at Darden Hill and Sycamore. Sawyer Ranch, I'm sorry. I was thinking of the schools. Sawyer Ranch and Darden Hill, 155 acres. Anytime we buy property, and I just want to be clear on this, we have to buy it with some type of potential future use, right? We don't want to buy a huge piece of land and then recognize that half of it is unusable for whatever reason. So anytime we buy, if it's 20 acres, 60 acres, 100 acres, we do what we call feasibility studies on. Okay, if we wanted to, how can we maximize this piece of property? And so in doing so at that 155 acre site, there was a study done that says that we could put, if merited, we're building actually our elementary number 5 is going out there. There's also space available on that site for what would be the equivalent of a middle school kind of size, anywhere from 850 to 1,200 student middle school. And we would have capacity to have a high school size or a 2,500 size building of some sort. And again, we would not do our due diligence if we didn't do some of those studies before we bought property, because I'm sure if you've looked at land before, it all looks good until you get into it and go, oh my gosh, this is a floodplain, I can't put anything here. And so we do that with every piece of property before we purchase it, so that we know what that capacity potential could be. Now, does it always end up exactly that way? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe there's some ancillary facilities that go on those spaces. And again, it's based on what our numbers would tell us.
That's the largest piece we have.
That is. We're in the midst of finalizing property at Headwaters, and that's our next largest, which is about 64 acres. And so again, from a feasibility standpoint, would be a potential for an elementary site and a middle school site. I mean, that land would support that if we needed it to. And then we have Mount Gainer property, which is 24 acres. And again, when you look at those numbers, you're really kind of looking more at a kind of an elementary kind of campus there on that size of property. And so those are the pieces of property that we currently are in our pocket. We own those. Our Headwaters hopefully soon to own. We're not close.
And I presume with the building or the plans for the elementary school, it's an elementary, right?
Yes.
It's going along, following suit with a plan of doing an elementary, middle school, and high school as far as the placement on the property.
We again, when we place that, we are leaving our options open.
Leaving it open.
Yeah, we don't want to put a middle school in the middle of the 155 and go, oh, wish we would have slid that over a little bit. We'll put wheels on it. Any other questions? I mean, this is a great slide, but to me, it's got a lot going on.
I have a question. I know that for school districts and TEA, the state collects a lot of data on career and college readiness and that kind of thing. Do you have any data related to these different configurations related to career and college readiness and outcomes for students? So is there a configuration that's more effective as far as getting kids to college, kids staying in college, or preparing for careers?
I think that's a great question we can ask them. We can absolutely pull out the research on it. I did a community meeting last night where we asked the community to rate all of the career and technical programs based on what they thought was going to give the most value to students right after graduation. And so I think that any of these models can adapt to serve that career tech purpose. I mean, it can be integrated into the comprehensive high school curriculum. It can be a center. As far as which is best, I mean, we can look into it and see if there's a definitive answer.
Yeah, I would think between TEA and coordinated board, you should be able to divide it.
And I would say we want to also be cautious of that, because if we talk about schools of choice, there's an application process there, right? And oftentimes, even with the application process, there's a commitment from parents. And what you tend to see, and there's some even locally, you have LASA Academy, those types of things. Those are school of choice where they're choosing to go there. And early college high schools, oftentimes, again, it's that student who wants that path. It's that parent who is supportive of that student exploring that path. And so it can be very similar to when you look at SAT scores from a non-public school, right? People pay to go there, and while these aren't paid situations, there is a level of commitment. And oftentimes, to go to some of these magnet schools that we're talking about that maybe outperform some regular comprehensive high schools, there's a commitment by the parents that they have to sign that they're going to commit to doing certain things to those kiddos to be there. And sometimes they actually will be booted out of those schools as well, depending on if there's behavioral issues and things. And so I hear what you're saying. We want to look at those pieces, but we just have to be cautious on what those models look like. Is it truly a free choice, or are there criteria by which you get accepted into those magnet schools or those STEM STEAM academies, those things?
Okay.
I've kind of heard some people talking about one other option, and I don't know if it makes sense to explore it, but what if we turned our Dripping Springs Middle School into a 9th grade center, because the proximity is already there to the high school, and then we just build another middle school somewhere, you know, I think we need to build another middle school anyway, here pretty soon, so is that an option? Because it has great facilities. It used to be our high school. We used to play our high school football games there up till a few years ago. And so the facilities are kind of designed for older children. So have we considered what that option might be like?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and I think, again, part of what we want to do is what we're doing right now to you know, brainstorm, get feedback on all these options without going into specific detail on, the question, can we convert that? Well, we've converted it before, right? And this was a middle school, and it got converted and expanded upon into the high school. So I think all of those are potential possibilities, but I think we really need to start looking at, again, looking at all the potential options, narrowing it down, getting feedback from our community as a whole to help guide some of that directional piece on the long-term situation. Because again, as you look at all these different options, all of them are viable, and whether you use existing buildings to get to the ninth grade center, or you build one, or again, when we're talking, and I can tell already with this group, we need to spend some time about middle school capacity. So I'm just going to say that up front, which is fine, but it only gets you so far, you know, down the road, and is that the direction we want to go? And it's a question we just have to kind of struggle with and work through. But middle school capacity is really our most pressing need coming up, because we just built, so we have a few years to build out here. But again, if we're talking about doing something with the middle school, again, we would have to, you know, do we build that one? Do we have to build two of them at that same time or not? Do you expand one? And so you can see how they're all interconnected parts. But I think it's a valid talking point as we move forward.
Okay, so kind of as we've gone through this, kind of my goal was to see are all of these viable to get feedback from the community, or can we eliminate a pair of these down? Does anybody want to filibuster to ask the community what they think about Local 1 High School? Or do you think we need to ask a question? Yeah, no, I'm asking, can we pare this down to fewer than 5 options to get feedback?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so ninth grade center, show of hands, should that stay or should that go?
When he says stay, it means just like, is that an option that we think should be presented to the community as a whole to consider? Not to like,
Yeah, I'm not asking you to pick one, I'm just so we can collect further feedback on it. So raise your hand if you want ninth grade center to stay as an option that we ask the community about. Okay. 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I don't see no one. Choice campus concept. Yes? Something? A little bit? All right, one high school campus. Okay. Okay. No, that's good feedback. Additional comprehensive high school. Okay. I don't see any reason not to ask all 5 based on what I saw. Am I going to get run out of town if we ask all 5? Okay. Which one?
Either way.
Yeah, I would say if there is an example of the choice campus concept that works when you're going only from one feeder school, then I think we should keep it. But if there's not, I don't think we want to be a guinea pig for that.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Like you said, the 2 options that work are being fed by 3 to 5 high schools.
Yeah.
Right.
Question?
And I'll comment on that idea. It was brought up, not by me, but it was a great idea at our table, that if we look at a comprehensive high school, we can do, is it Vernon that we talked about? That has 2 comprehensive high schools that have magnet schools within them, so you can still have that choice. but it's within the high schools that are already there, so they are self-sustaining because of the numbers.
Okay.
And students are where they need to be based on their interests.
So just flexibility to be able to do more within the walls.
Right.
I think if you're talking about building a building just for a choice concept, if it won't work with a one school system model, then we shouldn't put it out.
Okay.
I agree.
Yes.
While most of us didn't raise our hand that we should keep the stay with one high school option out there, I feel like for the community, they need to see that as an option.
Yeah.
Because the last time we put it out to the community, we gave them 2 choices and that was one of them.
Okay.
And I feel like if we take that off, that could be problematic
Okay.
for the community. So I feel like that to include all of the stakeholders, I feel like the one high school should stay on there as an option when it's presented for feedback.
Is Alan the right example?
They only do it.
Everybody knows.
Okay, everybody
Not
knows.
everybody, I didn't know that.
Only one that big.
Yeah. Well, and it's only 10, 12. They have an Anchorage Center that has 1,500 people. Yes.
Well, I really have a question for facilities and admin. Is there any way, for the one high school, is there any way for this campus to be extended anymore? Like structurally, like, can we go up? Can we like,
Can't go up, it would really be about
Oh, not that
having to find additional adjacent properties that have structure.
So the question, if you couldn't hear the question, was, is it even physically possible to expand this site? And kind of the answer was, is that it almost have to be like we'd be building a campus with adjacent properties and separate buildings. So it wouldn't necessarily be a giant mega building like, you know. Yes?
So this isn't about what we keep, but it's something that we ended up discussing that I mean, you've got longevity in there and how long it gets until we get capacity.
Sure.
But it seemed like a lot of the pros and cons were relative to the flexibility that you have in transitioning. And so it seems like a couple of the options, maybe just one, has the ability for the school board and the administration to be flexible, allow inter-district transfers, allow for grandfathering, that sort of thing. Whereas the other, they might need capacity at the same time,
Okay.
but there's not a choice of the 9th and the 10th grade, and there's not the ability to keep people on specific campuses. Whereas with the additional comprehensive, if it's built to where we don't max out for 15 years, you should have that capacity where people will transfer.
So maybe putting on here an ease of transition.
Or just showing how it's going to fill in when, so that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So if we open a ninth grade center, it's going to be full the day it's over.
Sure.
I want to speak a little bit also to the potential of a second comprehensive high school. Being in a district that has gone through this, you know, several times from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, up to 6 and 7. There are even transitional ways in which you bring on comprehensive high schools. So it's not, sometimes people I think, oh, we're going to split to high school. That means all 9th and 12th graders, 9th through 12th, do this and we're going to go like that. You go over here and you go over here. Typically you're going to transition that through, and I've seen it everywhere from starting with one grade level and then building the campus that way so you're not uprooting kids who are already in the system. I've also seen it where you do 2 grade levels at a time, like your 9th and 10th grade class. Well, 9th grade hasn't been anywhere yet, so they're split before they get together. And then the 10th grade, though, who are 9th graders would split. And again, a lot of that revolves around your capacity and what kind of relief you need there. But I just like to point that out because I think automatically people go, oh, you're going from 1 to 2, that means half the kids that were here this year, next year aren't going to be here. And that, I wouldn't recommend that as a practice at all. And I've been through it in multiple ways, but I think it's a better way to transition through there.
Any other questions? Yes?
So is our charge to make a recommendation of what's going to get us to 2024, 25, or are we talking about the 7,300?
Yes.
So
So
high schools isn't going to do it.
So I think that, well, right, I think that the exercise is we want to know where we're going, but we don't want to do something on the way that's going to compromise where we're going. So going from 1 high school to 2 if it's 2,500, I don't think compromises going to 3. One of the tables came up with an idea is, well, could we do except in comprehensive high school and then eventually do 2 ninth grades, do a 9th grade center in each of them. And so that was an idea, but we wouldn't necessarily have to make that decision now, because that really wouldn't affect what you're looking at with the second high school. You know, it might have an impact on land, but that's about it. That's a choice that we can make later down the road. Any other questions? Yep.
So in the conversation with the additional high school, is the intent to have the capacity day 1 100 or 1,500 day 1 with also to expand the 100 when needed?
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of systems do, is they would build, if they determine that, 2,500 is our number, we're going to build the core spaces for 2,500. And then we can add the classroom space when it's needed. A lot of systems do that. Mason High School, I think, is a good example where they started at 2,400 and then they popped another pod on there when they needed it. They grew into it and added some actual floor space back. So to answer your question, it can be purpose-built to be added on to. Yes?
So one of the comments at our table about the difference between a 9th grade center and a 9-10 over in the Darden area is the condition of the roads, the safety of those sophomores driving in that area. So just something to consider. Freshmen don't drive, versus 9 through 10 or another comprehensive high school over there. What are the road conditions going to be like leading to that campus?
Oh, they are? Yeah. So we know that already.
We've heard actually future plans for the Darden road is expansion, and they're almost seeing that as their call. Don't shoot the messenger or anything, but I've heard it is looking to be a future true bypass around Liberty Springs, Darden Hill, and connecting somewhere on the other side of our buildings here. But that's future, and I don't know if that's 2 years from now or 8 years from now.
It needs to be in the plan.
Right.
Put up.
No, we are working with the county engineers and traffic folks as we're even with the elementary site going out there. We're having discussions about what that looks like and the timing for all those things.
Any other questions?
Yes. All right. So a 9th grade center that's proximity based, the 14 acres that's available is not enough. Is that correct?
Probably not.
Here.
It's just because of additional parking and those kind of needs as well. It's something that we can look at. I mean,
So what's on the other side of the Roger Hanks? Is that still our land that's not going to be usable, or
Which part of Roger Hanks?
or what is the cut?
One that's going out to 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's right now, there's essentially, there was 17, 18 acres there. Once the road goes through, the majority of it is on the other side of the road. So the 14 or 15 acres would be on the other side of Roger Hanks. So if you're going to do something there, it would almost need to be like a standalone where all the students are driving, as opposed to having to come across to do.
You do empty half the time.
I'm sorry,
I know that on this right here, there's Beacon Springs
county, yeah.
Sports Association on the coast field. I don't know how much land that is. Is that enough to buy that for a 9th grade center?
That's
Do you
something,
know how much land BSYSA owns right here?
Right around 20 acres, about 20 acres.
20 acres. Is that enough for a 9th grade center? If we were to work, they talked before and other things about swapping. They would love to be somewhere else, I think.
I think we have to study, just like we did do all of our other properties, we really have to do a feasibility study on it, kind of thing, but I don't want to jump quite there yet until we kind of get more of the feedback on the direction piece, if that makes sense. I think we would, as we get to those, settling in on what those options are, what that interest level is, and we can start to look at some of those, but it's like anything else. Every property is not created equal. Like a real nice piece, flat piece that's rectangular in nature is a nice way to put something on, but when you have, narrow pieces and things, it kind of limits your design and scope of your project sometimes, so.
What we want to do is we want to get feedback from the community on the concept.
Right.
You know,
So if they like it, if everybody likes the ninth grade center, then we'll just find a way to make it
we'll look
happen.
toward, we'll look at the
Or
next
would
steps.
we then, what I don't want to do is have to go back to the community and say, oh, you loved it? We can't do that.
Okay.
There's no land nearby, and so it was a good idea, thank you for your feedback, but, we can't do it, and that's my only concern. But I guess our out on that, if the community loves it, would be using the existing middle school.
Sure, I mean,
If the community really wants that.
Yeah, I think we just have to get there yet. I love the creativity and the solution focused kind of thing, but I don't want to jump to that until we get more feedback and we have to study and look at the impact. And as Scott even mentioned before, middle school size is also going to drive a little bit of some of our high school decisions because again, you have to think about how all these things feed together over time. And again, that capacity and how long that will serve to meet the need for the students. So.
okay. Next steps, we'll work on building an online community survey. On that tag in front of you, I think there's, if there's any other additional questions you think that we should ask the community to weigh in on, we'd like to get those from you. We'll use those to kind of build our survey. Our next meeting we'll have is April 2nd. And at that point, we'll be reviewing the survey results. So I want to get the survey out the next week or so and have it up for about a month. And then we'll meet back to review the results on April 2nd. And then we'll have further community engagement once we have a chance to evaluate what that feedback looks like, and we can tailor that community engagement to get the information that we need to work towards that recommendation.
And I think just a couple other pieces that are looming. One will be, again, once we get that data information back, it'll also help guide our discussions about timing of some of these things. When do we need that next elementary school? We'll have more conversations around middle school size, because again, that will drive, what that next building or expansion potentially could be. And then also with that, in order to do anything beyond what we're doing right now, it would be a discussion about what's the timing for another bond package in the future. How far is that? A year out? Is that 2 years out? Is that 3 years out? So all those things are interconnected, but we have to kind of begin to answer some of those early questions to help guide those other decisions. Does that make sense? All right, if you could fill out your exit ticket. Again, I want to thank Cooperative Strategies for being here and helping facilitate the discussion tonight. And I appreciate y'all being here on a cold, miserable night. And we look forward to seeing you back April 2nd. Same place, same time.
I was really hoping it'd be 65 or 70 degrees.
If you don't like it, we say wait till tomorrow, right?
It'll change.